on the surface, it's really straightforward. It's really straightforward, and these guys can really help set you up with the gear that you need. You're really not going to need to spend an exuberant amount. You don't need to overspend.
Nope. You can get a basic grow setup to grow your legal 4 plants for anywhere from $200 all the way up to the sky's the limit if you want to get them real big or have controllers that will text you if it's too humid in your room.
Yeah. And so also one of the things that they're going to have to want to control on that light, which you were talking about, as far as controlling the amount of light that's going to come in their nighttime, because you don't want to let any light in during their off hours. If you interrupt their sleep, you've interrupted that off light cycle. You have to kind of redo that light cycle, if you will. But grow tents are a great option. Instead of people just trying to put them in their closet and you turn on your bedroom light and light sneaks in underneath your bedroom door, now you have that light problem interrupting the plant sleep cycle. If they're not on the same sleep cycle as you are, a different time of year. So the grow tents, I'm sure you guys offer at your location as well, and those are a great option to try and help.
They are.
You can hang the carbon filters inside of those.
Absolutely.
Keep the smell down, make sure you're not offending your neighbors, because there are going to be some people who are growing in their apartments. I don't know what the apartment complexes, I'm sure every apartment complex is going to have their own regulations on who they're going to allow and if they allow it in their complex. But those are one of the things that you want to be mindful of your neighbors. If they do allow it there, be mindful of your neighbors.
Absolutely.
Not everybody enjoys the smell. We enjoy the smell, but not everybody enjoys the smell of it. So just be courteous of your neighbors.
Absolutely. In addition to getting a light set up for your home grow, you will 100% need a carbon filter and a fan if you're growing in the city or in an apartment. We've made leaps and bounds in legalizing this for responsible adults now. The only responsible thing to do if you're growing next to other people is put a carbon filter in your grow area. What we've seen in other legal states is eventually cities or counties or local jurisdictions adopt nuisance ordinances regarding the odor of growing cannabis. You can get a fine, you can get a ticket. It could lead to more serious repercussions if you keep violating it. And I believe these are reasonable laws.
Certainly.
It's only a matter of time before a filter fails, which is okay. They have a fixed life on them. But if most of the time you're filtering your air, your neighbors probably won't be that bothered by the one day that you realize you need a new filter.
Right.
They're easy to set up, and what we generally do is pair our filters to our exhaust fans that help control our temperature, our humidity, and our CO2 levels.
Okay.
So you can set them up to be an integrated part of your system. If you force the air that's exhausting from your grow area through the carbon bed of the filter, it doesn't smell like anything on the way out. The carbon beds actually capture the odor molecules and retain them. It doesn't just cover them up like air freshener or something.
Right. So what it's really doing is there's an exhaust fan, and you brought one with you.
Yeah, I can go grab it and show you guys.
That'd be great.
Yeah. We've got a few different options and configurations for these things. This is sorry, I'll get this over here. This is a basic 6-inch exhaust fan and carbon filter setup. You can see here we have two main components to the system. Our centrifugal fan, this moves the air. This is our carbon filter here. It is a cylindrical perforated metal housing that
has a bunch of
carbon packed in there. So putting this filter on the intake end of your fan forces all the odor molecules to pass through that 2-inch thick carbon bed and get stuck. They're very simple, they're easy, they'll help control heat, humidity, and odor. And you could walk out with a setup like this that should be more than adequate for most medium to small size grow areas for about $250.
$250 to keep your neighbors off your back. $250.
Keep your neighbors off your back, and be sure that we can keep doing this.
That's right.
If we don't be responsible as cannabis users and regular adults that live in a community, people are going to get mad at us and they're going to try and change things.
Certainly.
This is one of the pieces of technology that will also not only keep your neighbors not mad at you, but also help clean the air in your grow environment.
Oh, yeah.
These things will catch particulate, dust, dander from skin, anything you just wouldn't want floating around near your plants. There's plenty of other ways to mitigate odor. In a grow, carbon filters tend to just be the most effective because they actually remove the odor molecules from the air. There's air fresheners, air coverings, but I mean, it smells like what it is. It smells like Febreze and a cannabis plant.
Yes, exactly.
You're not really tricking
anybody. No.
And they're expensive, and then you're worried you're spraying a bunch of propellants in the air for no reason.
Yeah, and then possibly getting on your plant that you're going to end up consuming later on.
Which you don't want.
Exactly. And so pesticides, inevitably, if somebody is a little bit lackadaisical, they're going to get some type of a pest or something like that in their tent. What would you say is the best approach to that, knowing that you got to be very careful on what you throw on here? You just can't throw any type of insecticide or pesticide on here and then think it's okay to consume it after you harvest.
I think the first step in what we would call integrated pest management on the hemp farms is keeping a clean environment. Don't go do yard work and then go into your tent. Don't go help your friend cut down trees and then go service your plants. I prefer never to wear outdoor shoes or clothes anywhere near one of these grow tents. Microscopic bugs can ride in on your hair, on your shirt. They can blow around in the wind. But I think it's an inevitability that if you are growing your cannabis at home, you will at some point deal with pests or pathogens. The big 3 insect pests people are going to deal with here in Virginia are mites, thrips, and aphids. These are going to be very common here. They're all over the place. We will also have lots of people, because we have a fairly humid environment, dealing with things like bud rot and powdery mildew. These are fungal pathogens, and then there's all kinds of diseases. But if we're really careful about what we're doing when we're working the plants, we could probably try and avoid these. When it comes to pest management, we at Happy Trees do not endorse any of these gross nuclear bomb type chemicals. In many states, they're illegal in use for recreational or medical cannabis, as they should be. You want to be really, really aware of what you're putting in your plants. We like to use things that are based on botanical oils or extracts of plants. We like to use lots of predator insects. You can use beneficial bugs that will just eat any pests before they can do damage to your plant. If you use beneficial bugs, you need to be really careful about what you're spraying or feeding the plants, because a lot of the pesticides, even the nice all natural and organic ones we use, are not selective. They will kill your beneficial mites as well as the mites you don't want.
Now, if you have a healthy environment and you have healthy soil and you have healthy plants, typically pests do not attack these plants.
They don't like healthy plants.
They don't like healthy plants. So if you start seeing these, it may be a sign that either one, you neglected, your dress code, or you've neglected the plant. I know this sounds like a lot of maintenance now. We said it's not a lot of maintenance, but now it sounds like a lot of maintenance. Well, sure, when you get to a sick plant and you're trying to keep it, and now you only have 4 plants to work with. If you lose 3, you only got one left. That's a huge loss. So again, making sure that you have a healthy environment and a healthy soil or healthy hydro system, a clean system, stuff like that, making sure that is is clean.
Keeping them clean and healthy is going to be your best line of defense against pest and pathogen problems. If you keep your environment clean and you keep your plants happy and healthy, in the event a pest does get in there, it's probably going to want to go somewhere else.
Got you. And I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people are going to make, I know you're going to do it because I've done it early on, is you try and plant before your environment is already set up. Make sure your environment is set up. Create the environment first. Create that perfect humidity, create your light source, create all of the things that you're going to need for that plant to live in that environment, and then plant. Don't plant as you're trying to create this environment, because you're going to end up not realizing how quick this thing grows and how quick it needs something out of this environment that you haven't implemented yet, and it's going to affect that plant. Again, all these little things affect the yield, and when you're dealing with 4 plants is enough if you do it right. If you don't do it right and your yields are affected, then you're like, wow, 4 plants isn't much.
If you just take a little bit, a reasonable sized 4 plant grow area could be set up with tents and everything in an afternoon, and then you can spend 2 days just running it and see what's going on, and that could save you lots and lots of trouble down the road.
Got you. Now, as far as the tents go and the light systems and everything like that for indoor, there is a minimal amount of light that you will need, but there also is a such thing as too much light. You can't just throw 3,000 watts into a 4x4 tent and think you're going to get 3,000 watts worth of yield. It just doesn't happen that way. Again, going back off of size, yield is based off of size. How large of a canopy can you get? but at the same time, a plant can only absorb so much light.
Absolutely.
Before you actually, just fry it.
When we look at how much light plants need, there's a thing called DLI, daylight integral,
Right.
that will allow us to calculate exactly how much light we can give this plant before it experiences negative effects. Overlighting plants will cause them to stunt, grow slower. It'll cause the tops of the flowers to bleach and misform. It may introduce stress responses to the plant that will make them hermaphrodite on you. There's instruments that can detect how many micromoles per meter squared per second of light a plant is getting at the canopy.
Sure.
But for the most part, our home growers we can kind of match an area to a light system. If you say want to have enough light to grow 2 very big plants in a 4x8 area, we can figure out your goals for that, what other things are going on in your environment, and then get you a light that is efficient and dimmable. Most of these new modern lights are dimmable to where you can avoid the too much light situation by just turning a knob on it or pulling up your phone and playing with the smart controller app and figuring it out.
Yeah.
Too little light is also going to be a serious problem for people. Underlit cannabis plants tend to be very stretchy and weak. They also tend to produce very few flowers, and the flowers that do produce are generally of poor quality.
Yep.
So it's important to hit the sweet spot. For your first grow, you don't need to go get the $1,300 giant Super Pro LED panel. You do that on your second grow. But there's all kinds of ways to match the cultivation area to the required levels of light and make sure that you're not wasting money on power, you're not putting off unnecessary heat, and that your plants still have enough photons to do what they need to do with them.
Definitely.
Really what we're looking at when we're talking about light efficiency is how many photons does 1 watt of power make with that light. And if we throw too many photons at them, there's no point for that. We're wasting resources, burning fossil fuels for no reason.
Sure, they can't process it, right.
And you're generating excess heat, which is going to be one of the biggest problems for home growers.
Yeah, now that you generated heat, now you're responsible for cooling that heat.
And so it creates an endless cycle of wasted resources.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the dimmable light thing, I love the dimmable lights now, because it used to be that you had to hang your lights as high as possible, because you couldn't throw 300 or 600 watts on a seedling. You're going to kill this thing. So you had to kind of set it from underneath direct light until it got to a certain size. Now with the dimmable light sources, you can dim that light down to where it's a proper amount of light in its seedling stage. In its veg stage, you crank it up a little bit. And then when it gets to its flowering stage, then you can crank it up and more. So if a plant needs 1,000 watts to flower and to finish, you can't give it 1,000 watts for X amount of weeks of growing from that seedling stage to that finished stage. You're going to kill it before it even gets halfway there.
And if you've got a really strong one that'll stand up to it, you're just going to slow it down. Too much light will stunt them and make them very, very angry. Back in the day, we had no choice but to start with giant 1,000-watt lights and back them off the plant 5 feet when we started. Now the way most modern LED and HID fixtures are designed, they have either an external dimming switch or they're controller capable, which means you can set up basically a little computer network and then dim it from a main controller.
Right.
Things have even gotten so advanced we can get sensors that you can set on top of your canopy that will automatically dim or increase your light output based on what requirements you programmed in.
That's awesome. So now these office workers can sit at their office, check in on not only their kids, but check in on their plants.
You could pull out your smartphone and pull up in real time what happened. And you can change it right. Like I can see what's going on at my hemp farm seed room right now.
Yeah. And it'll tell you the temperatures and everything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Awesome. In those situations, you got to kind of weigh LED versus HID in the lighting systems and stuff like that. I would feel more comfortable saying that it would be a little safer growing with an LED in a tent versus a HID just due to the heat factor.
I think so.
And no external ballast systems or anything like that you have running.
The heat factor, and you don't have a bulb with a giant arc tube that's full of really hot gases that could explode.
Yeah.
And I know in California at least, effective, I think it's 2023 or 2024, it's going to be illegal for new recreational or medical grows to use anything with an HID bulb in it.
Oh, wow.
Just because of the energy consumption, and they're now taken as a building code risk. LEDs are easy to use, they're easy to move, they're easy to manipulate. You don't have to deal with the remote ballast like you said. Even a nice modern digital ballast is still about this big and can weigh 10 to 15 pounds. If you want to hang that high in your room, that's going to be logistically challenging.
Sure.
Particularly if you have limited mobility, or like myself, are just short. There's all kinds of good LED options that have come out. For years and years, most of us cultivators kind of thought the LEDs were a massive disappointment and a bit of a joke, but that changed about, I'd say, 5-6 years ago. They stepped up the technology a lot, and now we're seeing them outperform traditional HID lights and cost less to run.
Right, right, and that's the biggest thing is now that home cultivation is coming around, you are going to have an increase in your energy bill because you are going to have lights on for a longer period of time. How significant of an increase is going to be based off of what light system that you utilize. And LEDs consuming less energy for about the same amount of par, if you will.
Absolutely, yeah. LEDs are really, really efficient at turning that watt from the wall plug into photons. So a good analogy would be our standard commercial cultivation grid is about a 5x5 area. It's about 25 square feet.
Okay.
Traditionally, that's what a big old 1,000 watt would cover in flower.
Right.
And these things run at about 1,100 watts. They're screaming hot. There's 1,100 watts of power going through one light bulb that's about this big.
Yeah.
It produces a lot of heat. And now comparable LED systems are coming in at anywhere from 600 to 630 watts, which you're saving about 40% on power right there. And then because they're so efficient at turning those watts into photons, you almost never have to run them at full power. You may end up seeing as much as 50 or 60% reduction in power use by switching to LEDs. And you're also saving even more money on cooling.
Yeah.
If this is in your house and you're taking your exhaust fan and your carbon filter and blowing that hot air from your tent out into your living room, your AC is going to work harder.
Right.
So you'll be saving money two ways. You're not burning power for no reason, and you won't have to pay as much for cooling.
Now, just out of curiosity, do you guys actually help the customers with setup?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's something that you guys
something we've done for a couple hemp farms. Going forward into this newly civilian legal cultivation year, we're going to be offering setups anywhere from a small 2x2 tent up to whatever. We'll set up a big tent if you want.
That's good. So it's not just coming in, purchasing the right equipment, it's actually helping them set up the right equipment as well.
And we're there to ensure their success.
Yeah.
So not only will we go set it up if they'd like us to do so, we want them to come and check back. It's not just buy, click here, buy now, thanks for the money, here's your light.
Right.
That's not what Happy Trees is about. It never has been and it never will be.
Yeah.
We want to be sure that your project is fun and successful.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I think we're going to see a lot of people who may be unfamiliar with how this gear works wanting us to set it up, and then we'll show them one time. And then if they have a friend that says, oh, I want to do this, they'll be able to help them.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And so these are some clones. So this is something that they'll pick up from your store, will be a nice little dome system for taking clones off of these plants. And what we have in here is a couple of clones that we took in. Now, when you take the clones, they don't have any roots. So the only way that they will take in any type of moisture is through the leaf surface. So you want to spray the inside of this dome area, that way it can absorb into those leaf surfaces, right?
Yep. It's really important when you take clones that you keep the plugs really wet and do exactly what you did and keep the relative humidity high.
Right.
They don't have the roots to pull in water to move nutrients around, so we have to keep them in a very high humidity environment until they root. These roots look quite nice though.
Yeah, so these now are, what are we, in about 15 days in. So we're about 15 days in, and we got a couple of nice little root systems going here. So these, now that they have the roots on them, they're ready to go into the actual soil. So I no longer have to keep this dome on here. Once those roots start forming, I no longer have to keep the dome on here because now the roots can bring in that water and those nutrients. But I still have it on here anyways, just to kind of give people an idea of what the system looks like. And these will go into their solo cups. They'll go into a solo cup. You don't want to jump right into a big soil system from this little clone state, because the problem of overwatering, which a lot of people have. That is probably the number one fail that I've seen across the board, is overwatering.
It's very
plants.
common.
What happens is you guys drown these little root hairs on here, and when those root hairs drown and die and decay, it can't uptake those nutrients in the soil. So when people say, oh, you have a nutrient deficiency, or it's the soil has a nutrient deficiency, a lot of times that happened because you overwatered, you killed off a lot of those fibers at the end of these roots, and now it can't uptake the nutrients. So it's not necessarily that the soil is lacking those nutrients, it's the roots can't uptake the nutrients because they're decayed. So it is very important to know what your water to oxygen ratio is. You got to make sure that you have a soil that's not going to compact on you, stay wet all the time. It has to dry out. And I know you guys have a couple of different soil options there at the store that are really, coco coir based.
Yeah, they drain freely. They allow lots of air, but it's so important, like you said, to not overwater the plants. Overwatering them can be as bad or worse than underwatering them.
Oh, certainly.
It's quite common if people take a clone that's rooted and put it right in a big 5-gallon container for that container to just stay wet for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
And they see the outside dry out and they water it more. And then the plant's roots never fill out the container. Our goal when we're trying to grow a cannabis plant in a container is to get a nice solid root base like you've done on these. I can feel that it's one solid root ball.
Right.
And every time you let the soil dry out, you're convincing the roots that they need to go look for more water. So if we don't ever let the soil dry out, the roots don't fill out the container, and then you just have this little tiny sad fist-sized root ball in a 5-gallon container, and the plants underperform.
Yep.
It's very, very common. I think people are used to house plants or used to like outdoor vegetable gardens when it's 110 degrees here. And It doesn't work like that with our favorite plant.
Yeah, no. But
there are very few exceptions to you wanting that container to get a little dry before you water it again.
Yeah, certainly. And these are things that you'll help the consumers through in their process, and I'm sure they'll be able to reach back out to you in between their grows and get some great information.
Oh yeah.
As you guys have been able to explain many times for a lot of people in the area.
Most of what we do is education. That's how we think of it. We happen to sell things you can use after we've educated you a little bit, but for the most part, we just want to tell people things they need to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Sorry, I was so distracted.
No,
It
that
smells
right.
really good. She is sweeter than the other one.
Yeah, she is.
That one's got kind of some of the chem funk on it.
It does.
Acrid, nose burning, but this is.
Well,
nice
thank you guys for tuning in to RVAC Explains. We want to thank Chris from Happy Trees
Thank
coming
you guys
out
for having
and
us. It was
talking
fun.
about
Let's
the
do it
store.
again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.